Hollywood has never been scared of dramatizing tragedies. New release Patriots Day continues the tradition by adapting the story of the tragic Boston Marathon bombing. But how soon is too soon? I'm Hector Navarro, and this is Screen Junkies News. "29 days after the sinking of the Titanic," this is a true story, survivor Dorothy Gibson co-wrote and starred in Saved from the Titanic, a short silent film that told the story of her harrowing experience. While Hollywood has rarely turned around films at that rate, they certainly aren't coy when it comes to tragedy. With the release of Patriots Day from director Peter Berg, we here at Screen Junkies News decided to explore the question, how soon is too soon? And with me to help that discussion is this esteemed panel of experts, Mr. Jay Washington, Joe Starr, and JTE. Guys, let's get into it. We also want to know what you think, so go ahead and just be commenting below. We just want to open this discussion, start this discussion about tragedies when it comes to film. So first question for you guys. Can films like Patriots Day serve as an honor to the victims of a tragedy, to the people involved in it, or do you feel that they border on exploitation? JT, you've seen Patriots Day.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a hard question to answer because it's obviously your own opinion. It depends how much you were affected by the said event. Like, there could be stories from across the world that we're not really familiar with, so it didn't touch us on a deep level, so we might not have the same connection.
Correct.
Seeing Patriots Day, I grew up near Boston. I grew up in Connecticut. I used to go there all the time, so it definitely kind of hit home with me. And again, it comes down to the execution of the film.
Yeah.
All right? I need to see what the director's purposes are. I need to know what they're, are they trying to do their best to tell the story without taking one direct point of view, because you might not agree with that point of view. Mm-hmm. And I do think Peter Berg does a really good job of, he doesn't really make it about just the bombing. It's really about the story of a town coming together. It's about the community of Boston. I think Peter Berg does a really good job of doing that. And one of the reasons Mark Wahlberg said in interviews, like why he wanted to do this movie, because he grew up in Boston. He wanted to make sure that they got it right. He wanted to make sure they felt what he felt and what people in that city felt. And I think Peter Berg, who I believe is from New York, does a great job of actually portraying that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned that you were from the Boston area and that depending on where you're from, what your experience is, certain tragedies might affect you more. I know that, Jay, that a film critic from Boston was really outspoken against this film, right?
Because one of the biggest things is, we talked about this, Mark Wahlberg's character is not an actual character in the sense of the movie.
It's not a person, right?
So it's not a person that was added in for the film. So of course, when you have a situation like that where you have an extra character added, instead of using someone who was there throughout the whole thing, having them be the narrator per se, or go through their eyes, it can open up a lot of wounds, a lot of emotions behind it, because that's the part where the exploitation comes in.
Right.
It's like you're bringing in a story to, push this vehicle, the story, but also make more revenue off of it. You have a Mark Wahlberg, again, he's from that area. He wants to make sure the story is told well. Well, play one of the characters who are, one of the people who were there. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't have to be an added character. And I think that is why you had that journalist from Boston who was upset, and rightfully so. I mean, again, it does affect different people different ways.
Sure.
Yeah.
As all the movies that are tragedies turn into film. But people who are from the Boston area, who were participants in the marathon, who had family members they lost, of course, that's going to hit them as not just telling their tale and not telling just the tale of the community, but now you're doing this to make an extra buck. So
yeah, Joe, I want to ask you. You mentioned before we started too that there is a charity that is involved in the promotion or the marketing of this film of Patriots Day, but that you couldn't find that it was linked directly to box office gross, to box office profit. Apparently, the general response, generally speaking, from audience members in Boston leading up to this movie hasn't been super favorable. I mean, this happened in 2013. The movie's released in late 2016, early 2017. Is this something that can be used for good? Is this too soon, Joe, for this movie to come out?
I think it's a matter of intention, I guess, because another film that took place pretty quickly, or was released pretty quickly after its event, was Fruitvale Station.
Yes.
So I think there's a matter of intention here. Like, on one hand, I think that this movie regarding the Boston bombing can feel a little exploitive. For me personally, it's sort of fresh off the heels of like 13 Hours, and Michael Bay's not like the first person I like to think of when I think about tastefully handing handling a real world event.
Like Pearl Harbor, for example?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can just talk about Pearl Harbor for a second. I think that Pearl Harbor is a good example of like the most Hollywoodization that a movie that deals with a tragedy can be.
A film so tragic that we can now say whether or not it's too soon to make a movie about
the
that
making
movie.
of the movie Pearl Harbor.
Well, we talk about too soon. We're talking about movies like that. There's Dark Knight. It's that's about to come out.
Yeah.
The movie that's based on the Colorado shooting. And granted, I believe the event was about 2014, 2013, whenever The Dark Knight Rises came out.
That was 2012.
2012. Okay, so a little
2012.
further. But this movie goes in depth as to like, yo, this is the insight in everybody. What I was just getting at with Patriots Day, how you didn't add any extra characters. You know, you don't add extra. You have everybody. You even go into the details of the shooter. You know, and granted, people are going to say, well, we shouldn't show a spotlight on them.
Sure.
But you're getting all these different elements there. You didn't add anyone extra. You're not, and that's the part of, you know, you're going to tell a story and you're not doing it so much, you know, for the exploitation or the revenue end, because that's the hard part.
I got a question for you guys. I think that, to me personally, film does one of two things. It either educates or it entertains. And a lot of films do both. There's crossover. And even something like inspiring, which is just normally entertainment, to just feel an inspiring message, that can come from education, that can come from whatever a movie's doing. But JT, again, you just having seen Patriots Day, you also went back and saw the other Peter Berg film about a recent
Deepwater
tragedy,
Horizon.
Deepwater Horizon. Just about those movies, do you feel that this is something that educates or just entertains? Is there things that you learned about it? Do you feel like you have a better picture of the tragedy itself, or was it just sort of a entertaining, inspiring movie?
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he's still trying to deliver a movie. I mean, when you talk about Mark Wahlberg and how he's not a real character, there were so many cops that were involved in that day. I think he just uses Wahlberg as a vehicle to tell a bunch of different stories. Because there's only so many characters you can show in a film. Zero Dark 30, another film about this, you know, the killing of Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
I believe Jessica Chastain's character in that film, some of her storylines were from other agents.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to make a movie.
Right.
You're trying
Sure.
to tell a story from, you know, A, B, and C, and sometimes you have to condense things like that.
Things were also condensed and shortcutted in like Ben Affleck's Argo,
Yes,
which dealt
definitely.
with the hostage crisis. Yeah.
So, like, I understand how people could be upset about that.
Sure.
That one critic definitely laid it out there. He was not happy about it.
Right.
I think Peter Berg did a decent enough job where he was like, there are times when you're watching it, like, Wahlberg seems to be everywhere. At certain times, you're like, there's times where I
like
said, that was
physically, how did he get from this area of Boston to this area of Boston?
it's like he's a detective in it who gets kind of demoted because of some stuff he does. And there's certain times where he always seems to be a guy that's there to like help them out at times.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that was a different cop at that point, I bet.
Okay.
But again, I think just for script wise and telling a story, they had to condense it to one character.
Question for each of you guys, going off of what Joe was talking about earlier, how soon is too soon? Do you think it depends on the tragedy, depends on the film, or do you think there's a solid, like a 10-year waiting period?
Intention again.
I think there's a slippery slope here of our blockbuster films art. In the theater world, for instance, immediately after 9/11, New York theater across the country had immediate reactions to 9/11. After the Trayvon Martin shooting, theaters had immediate reactions to stuff like that. So, which we take because that's an artistic reaction to an emotion. So, do we allow movies the same response?
It's hard because the question is what's too soon, because then there becomes a time frame. You brought up Fruitvale Station. Incident took place 2009. Movie comes out 4 years later.
Right.
September 11th, we know that tragic incident happened in 2001. You get Flight 93 and 1993, both in 2006, 5 years later.
Yeah.
We'll go to some other ones, though. You get a Hotel Rwanda, for instance. The Rwandan genocide happened in 94. 10 years later, we get the movie. So the question becomes, if we say too soon, what's the parameters or the time frame we're going to get?
Right.
Because Deepwater Horizon is 2010 when it actually happened. We get the movie 2016 right behind Patriots Day. It's like, what is that time frame? Do we say, oh, you got to wait 15 years? Do we say, oh, you got to wait 10?
Sure. And do we invalidate an artist, a director, an actor's emotional sort of need to use their art just because there's a box office attached to it?
Right.
Like,
Right.
what disqualifies that?
Because there's commercialism and marketing and everything. Yeah.
I just feel like for me, as long as the film is done in a respectful way,
Right.
I don't think it could be too soon. Like Fruitvale Station, it was a great film that I didn't know too much about that. And the
Exactly.
second I left that
Comes about
theater,
education.
I went on YouTube, I started reading up about the case, and I was outraged. Hotel Rwanda, like that's not something that everybody in this area really knows about.
Absolutely.
And then I think that should have came out 2 years after that, because I would have liked to know about that earlier and some
about
things that were going
informing
on.
people around the
Yeah.
world that might not be aware of certain situations. So you guys
Exactly.
are listing a bunch of different examples. What do you guys think are films that have handled tragedy and tragic circumstances well versus movies that they haven't? I'm going to say haven't, Pearl Harbor. I'll be the first to
Yeah.
say it. It might be a controversial statement. Didn't quite handle that that event.
That beloved film.
By doing a love triangle between Ben Affleck, Josh Hartnett, and Kate Beckinsale. I'll say that.
For me, I'm sorry, guys. Fruitvale Station, actually, we keep bringing it up. It's
Yeah.
a great one for me because
Yeah.
it opened up a lot of dialogue that
Right.
needed to happen.
Right.
Because the incident of Oscar Grant was so. This is what happened on this end. This is
Yeah.
what was said, and that was it. To have this movie recant the entire incident leading up to it and afterwards, it opened up so much dialogue to the point where people were like, "Oh, this really does happen. This really is actual accounts." Now, something that wasn't Saving Private Ryan for me.
Really?
And I'm gonna tell you why.
I would love to hear this.
The whole purpose, I get the war. I get that, the tragedy of the war. But we've got a whole platoon that his whole entire job, find one soldier,
Right.
who at the same time was like, I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
Remember, when he actually got to Private Ryan, he was like, my brothers are dead. God rest their soul.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm staying here.
Yeah, and that is sort of, in a way, sort of similar to this, where Mark Wahlberg is sort of playing a representative character. The characters there are too. But yeah, I agree with that. That one, I think it's a little more about sort of maybe the experience of the war and sort of trying to hit different elements. That one also sort of, the same way Mark Wahlberg in this film sort of feels like lots of different people's stories, sort of like put into a fictional narrative.
And when I first
But
saw Saving Private Ryan and films like that and Schindler's List, when you're a kid, when you're younger, when you're in school, it massively impacted me.
Yes.
And I wasn't studying it like the way that we do as adults and we criticize films and all of the nuances there, but it was just something that showed me the visceral experience of war. I'm learning about World War II. I'm in 6th grade. Saving Private Ryan comes out in 1998, and it affected me. It affected me. But I'm sure that if I go back now and, we all experience films differently at different ages in our lives and different stages in our lives. But I think there's something to seeing films like this about tragedies when you're younger. They have a different effect on you for sure. For sure.
One film that I really appreciated was United 93, mainly because so much happened in that day. And there were so many stories that weren't told.
Yeah.
And what really, I thought Paul Greengrass did a great job was he actually used the guys that were in the flight control that day.
Yeah.
And to see like the
remember that.
confusion that was going on just with those guys, and not even then the military. Like, because I think there was a lot of questions after 9/11 were like, how did this happen? How did we not do this? How did we do that?
Right.
In United 93, I was like, okay, you kind of got their perspective. You could see how like it was they weren't prepared. And I think that's what that movie shows you from the ground and even up, in the air. They just weren't prepared for what was about to happen. And that film really educated me on to just like what was happening behind the scenes and how something that horrible could actually happen.
In that vein, one for me would be Black Hawk Down, which on one hand there is a lot of sort of standard a little bit of
Hollywood.
patriotism and Hollywood jingoism, but at the same time that movie does take a firm stance on the day-to-day, like the problems leading up to why their situation happened, from the larger, you have people commenting on why are you guys even here? So like the larger ideas to the smaller things like the communication system through chain of command was like costing lives on the ground. So, from the big ideas to the small details, they really took a look at everything that went into that event.
I'll say going back to Patriots Day, there's aspects that I learned watching this movie that I didn't know about. Things that led to the terrorists actually being caught. There was things that just weren't reported in the news as much. And watching it, and Peter Berg does a great job at the end of the film of really showing you these actual characters. There's actual footage of him talking. It almost turns to like a little bit of a documentary for the last like 5 minutes. He actually gives you like interviews with the people that you see in the film. And I appreciate that because it just helped me better understand what happened that day.
Absolutely. I like what you mentioned, JTE, that after you saw the film, you went home and you Googled it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I think that's at best what these movies can do. Last question to you guys. Let's just talk about Patriots Day for a quick hot second. How do you think that this is going to do box office wise? Meaning, how how are audiences going to react? Is this something that you think audiences are going to respect and go to the theater and learn and mourn possibly? Or is this maybe not the best time for this film? Are audiences right now looking for more escapism?
I think people will go. I think people will go see it, and it's not going to be this multi-mega generator at the box office.
Sure.
But I believe people are going to go see it. They're going to watch it, and again, they're going to go Google. They're going to go research more things because now their minds open, their eyes are open to things. So I think it is. But I also, people do want a little bit of escapism when you're hearing about terrorism at this, and constantly you're hearing about all these other things. They're constantly bombarded by it. So they want something different besides everything that's constantly being put in front of them. They're going to watch it. They're going to research it. Then they're going to try to just go on to the next thing because unfortunately, as tragic as it was, as all these situations that have happened, you live it, you experience it, but you can't allow yourself to revel in it. You have to go on forward in life.
Good point. Yeah, Joe, JT, what do you guys think?
I do feel like, especially in the past couple of years, with like 13 Hours and Deepwater Horizon, this type of movie is almost starting to feel like a franchise, if that makes sense. And I think the impact goes down.
As opposed to hey, Hollywood rallied together and they made this movie about this tragedy. You guys know about it. Come and see it.
Yeah, when World Trade Center came out, I remember for good or ill, it felt like a bigger deal, and it felt like it was going to make a bigger impact. And I feel like we're getting diminishing returns now.
JT?
Yeah, it's so hard to say. Like, money-wise, I'm not quite sure. All I can tell you is that when I left the theater, hearing all the people come pouring out of theater, I constantly heard, what a great movie. What a great movie.
Good. Good.
And it was really heartfelt, and I think the audience really connected with that. So I think if it does do good at box office, it's going to be because of word of mouth. I think people are going to see this and say, you should go see this. It's a rough movie to watch, but I think you'll be rewarded for actually going to go see it. I would recommend it to people, but just know it is heavy material. But again, for the educational purposes, I would say go see it just because I learned stuff that I'm so happy I know that I didn't know before.
Absolutely. It's kind of a weird tangent, but a little bit in the biopic realm. I think biopics do a similar thing. I learned so much about NWO when I saw Straight Outta Compton.
NWA.
NWA, no.
This is the New World Order.
Gotcha.
You learned some about
NWA, which I know it stands for and will not pronounce, but NWA, learned a lot about Straight Outta Compton. That's what I think biopics and films about tragedies, that's what they do the best, is that they get you inspired to go and learn. And I really want to thank you guys for coming and talking about a subject that's not super easy to talk about. You guys did a fantastic job. We want to know what you guys think on the internet. How soon is too soon for films about tragedy? Do you guys have examples of ones that you've really enjoyed and learned from and been moved by? And maybe examples that you thought were too commercial, too Hollywood? Let us know in the comments below. You can always be tweeting at us at SJ News. And you can always be looking at more videos right here on the side. And we'll be back tomorrow with more stuff. Thanks. Bye.